Okay, so I wanted to look at the translations of Blake because I've always read him in English, and when this conference was presented, I saw the title and translations was a part of it. So I thought I should check into Turkish Blakes, and I bought all the Blake books I could find, and there aren't many, as you can see, and the oldest translation of William Blake into Turkish is in 1995, um, and it is Songs of Innocence. And it is a really recent endeavor to translate Blake into Turkish. And most of the translations, as you can see, are either Songs of Innocence and Experience or Marriage of Heaven and Hell. People didn't go into translating Blake's prophetic works because they are longer, they are difficult, more difficult probably, and most of the times, other than Songs of Innocence and Experience and Marriage of Heaven and Hell, there are some selected works. So there are two works I could find that deal with the prophetic books of William Blake. One of them is Tozan Alkan's Kehanetin Gölgeleri, which is a direct translation of Shadows of Prophecy from Marriage of Heaven and Hell, or Song of Liberty, to be more precise, and it was translated in 2014. It includes a wide range of Blake's works. It is not only books of prophecy, but it has poetical sketches, selection of poetical sketches, songs of innocence and experience. There are selections from the notebooks, and he chose, interestingly, as books of prophecy, there's no natural religion, all religions are one, Tyrael, Book of Tel, Song of Laws, Book of Laws, Ahania, and Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and Europe, but not America or the other prophetic works, or Urizen, for example. And the other translation that deals with the prophetic books is Kaan Ökten's 2015 book, Vahiy Kitapları. And he tried to keep it more in form of prophecy with his selection, and he had a preface that explained why he chose these books. As you can see, although they are both translations of books of prophecy, or it has prophecy in their title, they do not have the same word as prophecy, because in Turkish, prophecy can either mean being able to see the future, which is kehanet. I'm sorry, which is kehanet, and something that is divine, a divine word, which is vahi. So as you can see, both translators chose different versions of the word prophecy, which leads us into their translation strategies. They chose different strategies for their titles. Um, Tozan Alkan is one of the translators that translated Blake into Turkish the most. And as you can see, he chose different and interesting adjectives for Blake and his works. So as he is the leading translator, one of the leading translators of Blake into Turkish, if people read his works, they would be directed in his ideology, in a sense. In his preface to Blake's works, he said, anlamı olmayan tuhaf kelimeler, meaningless, weird words, uydurduğu mythology, which means a mythology he fabricated or made up, but uydurmak or uydurduğu in Turkish really is a very negative connotation. It has a very negative connotation. He says tümüyle anlamsız, entirely meaningless, and never can be understood. He says Blake started, he's one of the pioneers of automatic writing, but I've never seen it anywhere else, so it is interesting. In his translation, he added a glossary at the end and some summaries of the works, but in his translations, most of the works are only in Turkish, only with the title plates in black and white, which reduces all Blake's works into words, which reduces some of the meaning. While in Kanuk'tan's translation, he used words like devrimci, revolutionary, visionary. He said his works were inspiring and exciting, that he used an epic, mystical atmosphere and cadence. That's why he tried to use the richness of the Turkish language. He claims that he used the richness of the Turkish language in order to give the same mystical and epic atmosphere to his work. But there are some minor mistakes. One of them is a major mistake because he said marriage of heaven and earth in his work, in the English version of Marriage of Heaven and Hell. And that is a big mistake, I think. There are some mistakes, but most of the time he's trying so hard to translate and give an epic air to his work that sometimes it does not work. He also added a glossary to his work. And what is more important, I think, in his translation is that he used all the plates for all the works. And on the left side, we can see original Blake plates. And on the right side, we can see the Turkish versions. But of course, I cannot go too deep into these works. So I had to try to understand why is not Blake so why are the translators trying to avoid Blake? What is so difficult about him? Why don't we try to translate more Blake? So first of all, the local and personal allusions Blake uses are too immense and too difficult to grasp for the for the Turkish imagination, let alone human imagination. Biblical These local and personal allusions lead to political messages that cannot translate well into Turkish. And so the Turkish people would have difficult understanding without extensive footnotes and annotations. And the translations we have so far have not included a lot of footnotes or annotations, so they fail to relay the message in a sense. Another problem is the biblical allusions Blake uses, because most of Blake's works depend heavily on the Bible. And Turkey is not a Christian country, and biblical allusions fail to pass on to us when we try to make these translations. So in order to use these allusions, we have to rely heavily upon, again, footnotes, annotations, endnotes, and lots of other notes to understand what they really mean. Blake has a very unique rhythm and cadence in his own works, and he used it as an orator. But since we don't have a translation of his late works like Milton and Jerusalem or the Four Zoas, the cadence is mostly and rhythm is mostly dependent on the 14ers he used in his earlier works. But the syntax and the word choice is very important in Turkish translations, because the Turkish sentence structure and syntax is very different from English syntax. So whenever you want to translate an English text into Turkish, it proves difficult. And when we add Blakean language into the formula, it proves extra difficult, because Blake's words are not easy to grasp, first of all. And when you try to translate them, in a sense, you are forced to use these translations in a different syntax, in a very different syntax from its original. So you need to understand it as a whole. First of all, you need to have a full grasp on Blakean mythology, and then translate it. and most of the translations fail here because Blakean mythology is so wide and so dependent on the other mythologies, and you have to have a knowledge of the British political history, Blake's personal history, biblical history, world history, art history, and literary history. So Turkish readers tend to not be so knowledgeable about these areas of expertise. So that's why when you translate these works, again, they might prove difficult, and people are usually afraid of Blake. Another problem, again, about language and the syntax and the rhythm is meter and rhyme. Blake used the 14ers, and when I checked the other translations I talked about before, they cannot maintain the 14ers. It is acceptable, of course, but when they translated, they could not find a meter that would match Blake's rhythm in Turkish. And sometimes they used a 20 syllable line, while the other line would extend into a 30 syllable line, and the other would be a 14 syllable. And this leads into a fluctuation in the rhythm. And unfortunately, while reading Blakean works, it leads us to be confused because that rhythm is what also gives meaning to Blakean works. Of course, I believe reading Blake without his plates would make it less, and a translation of Blake should definitely include these plates because Blake, as Blake said, there's no grain of sand that is not important in his paintings. So everything in his work is a complete complete work that complements each other. The writings and the paintings complement each other. So you need to have an extended grasp on these. I believe most of the problems arise from these things that I tried to summarize in this slide, because I have begun also a translation of Jerusalem, which Turkey shall have, or people of Turkey shall have, whether they will or no. And I have to thank Camila and Eliza for this, because last year, after their speech about the translations of Jerusalem last year, I was inspired and tried my hand at translation of Jerusalem, which proves really difficult because I'm trying to keep all these problems I mentioned before in mind, and I'm trying to work on them. So it will take me a long time before I can finally finish the translation of Jerusalem, I guess. Thank you.